Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe this video for more content on any of your alternative football favorites. Now, on to the show. Join me today. I have the pleasure of being joined by Carsten Keller. Carsten reached out to me previously through various European League of Football videos as well as content. We've been discussing back and forth, and we just decided, hey, let's get a video together. Both of us are very involved with covering the European League of Football and as well as engaging with the communities of the said league. Carsten, thank you for joining the show, by the way. Just to fill in those that are listening, what's your media scope? I know you have a few different pieces that you're at play when it comes to covering the league, or at least covering the club scene in Europe.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for the invite. And you did really good on the name, so better than most Americans usually do. So.
I appreciate that.
Perfect. I'm 45 years old. I live in Franconia, which is a part of Bavaria, God's hallowed country, like I usually say. I'm writing mainly about the National Football League since 2015. I had the opportunity to go to the NFL draft in Dallas, 2018 to the Super Bowl a year later, nice. And about a dozen London games in Wembley and last time in Tottenham. So usually I follow more the NFL, but since the start of the European Football League, or at least the announcement, and there was a lot of fan interest, so I took a little from my time and tried to find information which was not really easy in the beginning, like you covered in your podcast. So that was one minor part to get some information. Because the league was not really distributing any news at all. They just said, we're going to do a league, and they had a lot of visions they shared via press releases, but not much more. So it was not really easy to get information. And since they are like this little battle between the ELF and the highest German league, the GFL. So that's still going on, I guess. And that wasn't really easy to digest. And we have like two groups of fans. One are the GFL fans that always follow the GFL, and the other ones are the newer ones which get attracted by the Run NFL. This is the German broadcasting channel, or the NFL broadcasting, and Patrick Isumi, the commissioner of the ELF, is one of the commentators for the NFL here. So he's very popular, and he's one of the two founders. So we have those two groups, and I sometimes get the impression not everyone tries to get along. Let's say it like this. But it's been pretty interesting.
It's been interesting, I think, to see the relationships of at least the GFL and the ELF kind of develop over time. I've had conversations, of course, with some players. I've had conversations with some fans, and it's just like, it is kind of amazing that, the ELF's come in. It's gotten its TV exposure so far. And obviously the GLF there's still good games in GLF this year, by the way, too. The worries were, of course, like you had the Frankfurt Universe being kind of stripped of pretty much its entire team because it went to the ELF, or, you're worrying about the Stuttgart Scorpions having to deal with at least new media pressure from the Surge out there as well, or other German teams having to deal with teams in their local markets. But at least, play wise, for those that have been affected by players and at least exposure, it seems like there's still interest, but now obviously Germany is that foothold for the ELF itself, to where that's their base of operations pretty much, and where they're going to have the most central growth of their game, and then slowly kind of move outward into the continent itself. Where are you on all this? Obviously, I know you said you cover a lot of NFL, but you started looking into these pieces. I've asked this before. Do you see both of these two coexisting, or how do you see a future relationship if you say, for example, the ELF were to keep continually a pattern of growth like they are talking?
yeah, there's a lot of talk. So they said they want to have, I think, 24 teams when everything is said and done. And I think last week or the week before, they said London looks pretty promising. And a couple of weeks ago, they said Paris and Istanbul. So there's talk about their visions expanding. And I think if they make it out of this year, that might come true. So I always thought it's not the best idea to start it this year during the pandemic, because I covered the XFL 2 years ago when they announced they have like 2 years to prepare everything, and they had Oliver Luck as the commissioner, and he had experience forming such a league, and Patrick Isume and Seiko Karaicha, he's the other main guy in the league in the ELF. They didn't have any experience in this kind of field, and they had the additional trouble of a pandemic going on. So I was very skeptical. At the beginning of March, we did a podcast, and we estimated the chance that they start on time at around 5%. So we were wrong there. They started on time. They did all the games up to now. And more or less, I'm positively surprised that it runs like it does. There's some minor criticism here and there, but I think that's normal for a startup league. And I don't know if they coexist in the future. At least that's, I think, what the ALF wants, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. You mentioned Stuttgart and Frankfurt. Stuttgart, like we pronounce it. I went there 2 weeks ago. They had like a double header. On Saturday, it was the GFL game between Stuttgart Scorpions and Frankfurt Universe in the GFL. And on Sunday, in the same stadium, it was the ELF 1, the Stuttgart Surge against the Frankfurt Galaxy. So it was pretty interesting. And I think there wasn't too much difference in the game itself. So the level of play, it wasn't that different. You could see a lot of, or at least some differences between the surrounding stuff. So there were a lot more spectators for the EFL game. They had like 750, but that was due to the COVID restrictions. They said they could have sold like 2,000 or 3,000, and Stuttgart Surge had, I think, 500. So, and they are the established team, so you'd guess they'd have more fans. But there were a lot of newbies because the public announcer, it was the same guy on both days. At the start, he said, everyone who's here for the first time ever, just please stand up. So it was more newbies at the EFL game, but at least some were at the Scorpions game too. So it was like a lot of similarities concerning like considering the advertisement, for example, the cheerleader stuff, all that looked pretty much the same. I think the most recognizable difference was that the referee on Saturday spoke German via the announcer system, and the one in the EFL did it in English. And that was the game when Stuttgart Surge had the quarterback, Jacob Wright, was disqualified, and then he wasn't. And the next day he got canned. So that's when Aaron Ellis got his opportunity here, which I found
that's
amusing.
right. Yeah. Hey, trust me, we've talked here, we've talked on the show already. I mean, I've had comments too, the same thing where it's like, well, wait a minute, he's, obviously we had been critiquing, but one thing I will keep holding that we've said, we've hoped the best for this league so far, and any comment we've had with videos, and so far for me as an American, I would say so good. For your concerns, it's funny you mentioned the XFL coverage with the runway of sorts, the lead up being 2 years, having that longer time frame. I'm assuming with that you'll remember the Alliance of American Football then, which had a year. It kind of got rushed in because of the XFL announcement, and so when the ELF announced back in October of last year, or even September, I think it was either September or October, I'm spacing one of the 2 months, we're going, okay, I didn't remember this being a thing or hearing about this. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, they want to start less than a year away and get all this infrastructure together, and you're hearing behind the scenes how you have teams that are from the club scene getting pulled and all that, or they're being asked really quick on the fly, hey, you want to join in? Yeah, that to me is surprising that, throughout this so far, haven't heard anything that's completely horrible about the lead up or the leadership of the league. The play's been there. The broadcast quality's been there. Stuff's looking like it's on track to keep going the way they wanted. And they put this together in a year, which is still fascinating that it is working so well with less time than even the XFL had. And the XFL, for all intents and purposes, I loved what they did. And those 2 years were worth it for their buildup. They just, unfortunately, circumstances knocked them out of the game at the worst possible time in 2020. But that was a lead up that was great. And now you see the ELF, like you're talking, they're still in COVID situations over in that continent, and they're making it work. And they're apparently exceeding some expectations in terms of how the sales they were expecting for the limited seating capacity, in terms of how they were expecting fan response as well. It's been pretty impressive. At least myself, I like what they're doing in general, and that they are even able to get this far is all I can tell you.
In the beginning, I saw a lot of similarities with the Alliance because there was a lot of parallels. I thought that looks like the blueprint the Alliance went downhill right from the start when they played, because there was this shady financial situation when the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes stepped in after a couple of weeks, because apparently there was no more cash flow available. And it's not really clear here in Germany with the 6 franchises who the owners are. Not everywhere. Some in Frankfurt it's clear, but no one really knows who the owners of the Leipzig Kings are or the Berlin Thunder. So that looks a little suspect too. But otherwise, there's really a lot of good stuff going on. The TV product, like you mentioned, it by far exceeded my expectations, because I always wondered when they said the yellow lines, I thought they won't get it, but it looks good most of the times. Of course, there's some minor hiccups, which is okay, I think, for a new league. But overall, it looks really good on TV. And we didn't have too many lopsided games. Of course, after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you have a couple teams that look better than others. But overall, I think it's pretty good for such a pop-up league, or whatever you want to call it. And I have no clue how the TV ratings are. I know in the first week they were pretty good. They were way above the broadcast programming, usually the ratings. But I'm not sure if it went on like that or if it went a little down. But overall, the fan interest is really, really big. I think it's way more than I expected, because I write for the German football magazine Huddle, and they have an online presence as well. And all the ELF stuff gets clicked a lot. So it's way more interesting apparently right now than the NFL, which has no news at all right now.
Right. Kind of a dead period right now for the NFL anyway. I'm waiting to talk about it really until later this month, honestly, just because you get through almost a training camp or around training camp time, and then you can start talking about preseason cutdowns and such and so forth. So this is a great middle of the year kind of fill in for that football itch. And I've heard same thing. I've heard limited feedback on ratings. I definitely, one complaint I have heard a lot too, even leading up and now, is just kind of like the news and release points of like what the higher ups of the league have done. Sporadic at best, not as in the know at times as what people are saying. They wish that the league officials and the commissioner Sume would say more if they would at times on maybe updates. And that's the thing. And I agree. I've not heard anything about ownerships either. And I didn't even think about this till you even said that. I'm like, yeah, I really don't know many of the owners of these teams. It seems like obviously everything's like 2 thumbs up. Everything's on the right track from what we hear limitedly, but that's a good point. Not often I've been hearing much about ownership groups or who's running these teams. I know Leipzig was very last minute from just talking like to one player, actually Daniel Dokel, when I had him on, he kind of confirmed that was the same thing. They really rushed together that roster. But that's kind of what we're getting is, we don't, still not enough info, even for myself. I'm like, we could use a little bit more, where can I find certain things about how this team is run? That'd be pretty nice.
It's
I wish that'd be more of a case.
Yeah, it's not really transparent. And they always said from the beginning they want to be professional. And there were a lot of things that were not too professional, I think. So when they had just a press release when the two teams that got already announced before, Ingolstadt and Hildesheim Hannover, when they didn't qualify, whatever, they didn't get a contract together. But the problem was,
Right.
okay, they won't start in the EFL, but in the ELF, but they can't start in the GFL either because they got this kind of deadline. So they play in the third league now, both teams, and it's bad for their fans. And I think it should have been more than just a one-liner press release and saying, oh, they are out, but you can be happy. We have Leipzig and Cologne now. So that's not really the way to do it, I think. And there was a lot of stuff which was just done by the fly and could have been a lot more communicative and professional, but yeah, they chose another way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more stuff that's not professional yet, but I think we're in week 3, 4. So the stats are full of mistakes. If you look at the game books, Stuttgart had a kicker that was the running back that never played for them. They had the kicker in the game book, but he never kicked. So that's not really the way to do it. But I think the next couple of weeks, this should get straightened out and we get the stats. Because I can find any stats like league leaders or something. I mean, everyone knows the running back from Cologne, Madrid London. He's over 1,000 yards now, which you could calculate if you open each game book and do it one by one, but that's not the way to do it. So the website itself could use somewhere. It has a lot of advertisements on it, so I guess they sell a lot of space, but it should have more info, I think. But as I said, it's not like I'm against the league. I liked watching it 2 weeks ago, and I went to the NFL Europe like over a decade ago. I think they disbanded in 2007, so that's 14 years ago. And I went a lot of times there. I went to the World Bowl, so I was really a fan of the NFL Europe, and I wouldn't mind this league getting bigger and better.
Yeah, I do. I like that they went that route. Originally, I was worried that it was just being kind of, what's the best way we can get maybe some of the Americans invested, as well as like, kind of reinvigorate some of the ex-NFL Europe crowd, is get those teams, which maybe that is, as much as it was like, okay, this is cool, but like it could be a trap. It turned into be like, this is cool, and people were buying in because they remember those teams really well as well, for the ones that were more the diehard fan base, or the ones that cared about it back at the time, like yourself, like you're saying, you went to games in the past. I more relate to it as I researched the league, because at that time I was still pretty young for watching football, and I was still more trying to get involved with watching NFL football. So NFL Europe just kind of became a thing a few years ago when I started doing alternative leagues and leagues of the past. So, it's nice to see that they're using that image, and that, there's more teams they can go from. We're talking like London. If they are not the London Monarchs, I will be surprised if that is not the case, because that's a pretty simplistic one. I got people that have responded to me saying the Amsterdam Admirals, they better come back. That's a team that they can have under their belt. The Rhine Fire, that's another one that people keep saying that needs to be a team that should be back in the ELF, because that's another one they can use, because the NFL gave them that, grace, if you will, to use those names and likenesses. There's possibilities, and it definitely brings up that nostalgia. The stats, and this to comment on this point from yourself, this is something I do hope, one of a few things I hope they address at least next year. At the very least, it has to be next season. Individual stats, team lead, like league leaders, and I can toss that up to like a quick turnaround of a season to start, I guess, but that does need to be addressed. You have to have that if you are a professional league. I don't care what country you're in, especially if you're trying to push that look, you have to have that on your website. So, and I looked them up before we even started. I was like, let me get stats. I remember I was telling you that as we were going. And yeah, that was something I'm like, oh, wait, I can't pull these up because I can only pull the games up. Forget about it. We'll just go with what I know right now. But that needs to be addressed. And my thing, I love that they have dual announcers for German, for English, and even for Polish if you are watching, the Panthers. But they got to get color commentators in there for those announcers. The single commentators, they do as best of a job as they can, but it still is awkward hearing him do a comment and also call the play at the same time. You got to bounce off somebody. A traditional broadcast crew is I think at least a second person in those boots would be really nice if you could do that year too.
But that's like an American problem because we're used to it over here. Because most of the fans watch soccer, and in soccer usually it's only one commentator, so it's not as funny for our ears as it is for yours. So that's more because you're used to it, and I don't mind. I wouldn't mind another one because I'm used to it too, watching the NFL. But it's not like a complaint here. So there's other stuff, but this one is more or less not a theme over here. The Rhine Fire, since you mentioned it, I think they are announced for next year because the final this year is in Düsseldorf in I think it's now called Merkur Spiel Arena. So it's a kind of casino lottery name sponsor. And I'm pretty sure they come back. I'm not so sure right now how the NFL use the ELF, how they even consider them, because apparently there's a lawsuit that's mentioned because they wanted to use the logo some other form. So I'm not sure if that's true or not. At least that's like a rumor that's persistent here. So I'm not sure, but I think the London Monarchs is a great name. They should be back, and the Rhine Fire too. So that's two. I'm not sure about Amsterdam. I think they were in the NFL Europe before they were replaced by another German team, and the Scottish Claymores. So they had one of the nicest stadiums back when, but I'm not sure if they even play football anymore. So, but I think you can bet that at least Rhine Fire and probably one London franchise will be back next year. So to say, because it's not really back, of course. It's just a different kind of thing here. They tried to activate the guys like me who remember the NFL Europe, but there's not really much the same. It all looks a lot smaller. When Frankfurt Galaxy still played, we went like twice a year. It was a 2 or 3 hour drive, and they had like 30,000-40,000 people in there. So you can't compare it with that. There was a huge party surrounding it, and even without Corona, we won't have that kind of party, I think.
Yeah, there's going to be still some more groundwork, of course. I mean, you can't just you definitely can't expect to have that same presence come back. And I think the shield logo the NFL has, having that stamp on anything, helps too. If you're talking football, even more so, I think, outside the United States than anything else, because that is football in a global span. In America, it's there, but like it's a little easier, I think, to have someone migrate to a different football league and go straight into saying we can get, at least a 10,000 fan stadium or 10,000 fans in the stands because it's professional label and it has players from that league instantly. Whereas out here, you're like, well, we got the teams, but the NFL's obviously not with it anymore. So you have to it's going to be a little more building up if you're going to be doing it that way, without that backing or official support as it was back at the time. At least back when NFL Europe was a thing. I got to ask you, Carsten, we've seen through week 4 or through 4 weeks, I think we know who the power players are, or the main high marquee talents, at least for teams. It looks like so far you're looking at Hamburg, Frankfurt, and Wolfslaw. At least those 3 are so far kind of your top tier teams that I think might be making a run for this first championship right now, or most likely positioned. One of the questions with this, of course, came up was disparity of talent, because I think there are some questions about Poland, or at least Barcelona, kind of keeping pace with these German-led teams. Was that an issue for you and fans as well that you've talked about? at least like the competitive like level between different levels of how much football's ingrained with local talent? Or was it still you were maybe a little more positive on possibly a more balanced play, which luckily for the most part I think we have been getting.
I think when you look at the standings right now, it's more or less like everyone, or at least me, expected it to be, because I wrote the preview for the Wroclaw Panthers. I had an interview with their head coach, Jakub Sammel, about half an hour long. And they had the advantage of being a team that's been together for a couple of years. So that was the only one that's been together that long. Right. So I was pretty sure they're going to play a good role. And up to now, they did it. They lost in Frankfurt last week and had a bye week this time because they weren't without their chances in Frankfurt. So could have gone the other way. The right team won, but it wasn't like a huge difference. So that was okay. And Frankfurt and Hamburg, everyone expected to be at the front of the line. Hamburg is where the league has their place, and Patrick Isume is a lot at the Sea Devils, so everyone was pretty sure they're going to play a good role. And Leipzig, like you said, they were like a last-minute team. Cologne the same, so that was a big surprise package, whatever you could call it. But we were pretty sure that they won't be at the top team level. And Barcelona, same. They are like a national squad from Spain, but I think Spanish football is a little more like tier 2 in Europe. So it's a little like expected that they didn't win at all yet. But it's not like they got canned every game. So I think it's more or less like expected, I'd say. Stuttgart has their problems now. I mean, they won a thriller this week with the last-minute touchdown from Aaron Ellis to his tight end David Mesa. I think you talked about him in your last episode. The big tight end he was looking for, and when I was there like 2 weeks ago, I took a couple pictures from David Mesa, who was the last player after warm-ups, who was still on the field, and he's huge, and I'm not surprised that he played the role he did on Sunday. So he was the game winner, and I think it was deserved, but it was a game which was really hard to watch because there were a lot of flags and the rhythm was not really great. But I think the right team won, so that's okay.
Yeah, very back and forth affair. That was a good one, or probably my favorite, at least for the week, in terms of just back and forth football. You know, there were definitely swings, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. You know, it felt like at least early on, Leipzig first and third really had momentum, and then it just happened to be that the later halves you'd have Stuttgart. They collect themselves, get back in gear. And definitely Mates has become Ellis's, I think, favorite target. You're right. I pointed that out in my conversation with him for last week's show. Was he's like, yeah, I like tight end. I like to target tight ends. So go figure. Of course, he was Mates is making plays all across the field this contest. I'm like, that's keying in right where I was expecting it. Hopefully he's not giving everything away with that, but we'll see. We'll find out.
At least it worked for 1 week.
Right. He's gotta win. They're back to 500, So now you just got to keep evolving that offense. Hamburg doesn't surprise me, and honestly, for at least exposure, it feels like the league has almost I would say a nice chunk of its chips in that basket for trying to promote Hamburg and Frankfurt as much as they are. Obviously, Frankfurt being mostly the universe, just reskinned as the Galaxy now. The Hamburg Sea Devils have been consistently the first team launched. They've also been the one that I think has the best promotion on social. They have a lot of video content, a lot of stuff that they want, or that the league wants to go right, is really in Hamburg, Germany right now. So does not shock me in the least. I'm just happy the Panthers have made it to where it's not just completely German teams. You have a Polish team in here that says we're well established. We're going to have our say at the end of the day, and the way they fought the Galaxy, who blew out Cologne over the last week here, it's definitely going to be fun when you see at least them and Hamburg play, or, get another rematch. I think I'm pretty sure later in the year, Hamburg and Frankfurt play again, which that first week 1 contest was really not a good defensive battle. So
they play on August. I think it's the August 8, I think, because they want to play in the Deutsche Bank Arena, the big stadium where the local soccer team Eintracht Frankfurt usually plays, and where the Frankfurt Galaxy played back when it looked a little different way before the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup. But I think they want to play that game there. So I'm not sure if COVID allows it, because that's the main obstacle, I think, because it would make sense to play before, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 people in that huge stadium. It's where the GFL held their German Bowl the last 2 years, the final, or the last one, at least, and the next one in October will be there too. So it's a huge stadium, and it's really, really nice. And it would be a great game, I think, if COVID allows it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I might as well touch on this while we're at it, because obviously COVID, it is not as heavily looming, it seems, as it was maybe 6 months ago, but it still is a factor for attendance and for sports still. There's obviously talks about a variant that's going around the world now that's also an issue, might be an issue. What is the kind of safety and security right now, at least in your neck of the woods, or at least the country you're in? Maybe Europe as a whole, if you'd like, just to give for American audiences kind of a idea what it's like compared to, say, our country when we're trying to watch these games and they're having maybe slightly different restrictions for capacity than us over here.
Yeah, I think the capacities are still a lot lower than in America. But when I went to Stuttgart 2 weeks ago, they were only allowed to sell 750 tickets, and the stadium holds about, I think, 11,000. So it was like not even 10%. But it was right the next day they were lifting some of the restrictions, and Stuttgart was a little bit. They weren't happy about it, because everyone knew that the next day they could have sold more tickets, but not on that Sunday, which was not really logical, but whatever. And I think right now they're allowed to sell about 3,000 tickets. So that should be enough to get everyone in. But I looked it up. The game yesterday, they had close to 1,600. So I think that's about right now the level they can get into the stadium. I think Hamburg is sold out with that many fans too, because they win, and as long as they win and the product is that good, I think everyone wants to go there. But I'm not sure about the other ones. Berlin, I think, didn't sell that many, and they have. They played the first 2 games in a smaller stadium or another stadium, and they want to go to play in the stadium that hosted the German Bowl a couple of years ago, and then was closed down due to renovations, but they never renovated it, so it was empty for 3 years, and they want to have their games in this stadium, the Ludwig-Jahn Sportpark it's called, and I think it holds about 12,000 too, so right around it. It's a nice stadium, but it's a small one. I think the best one is still in Breslau. The Wroclaw Panthers have a really nice stadium, which is pretty big, and I think they can host more fans, but they didn't have more than 2,000, I think, for the first game. So that's about the interest. And most of the if you want to be vaccinated over here, you can be. So I think right now everyone can get vaccinated, but that's more or less the standard right now. But you have to be either have a test, a current test that's negative, or if you're vaccinated, you can go into the games too.
Okay, nice. Well, I'm glad the progress is being moved in the right direction too, for maybe more seating. Obviously getting vaccinated and moving those numbers along helps a lot. But I mean, you're saying restrictions at least have opened up a little more for Stuttgart, and you also have other areas that are getting more ticket sales as well. So that's good to hear. It obviously winning will help with getting more tickets once you get more seats open, if you can, for other markets too. But it's nice to hear that at least capacities are moving up. Maybe next year, next year when we most likely have full capacities all season, it'll be maybe neat to see that interest grow and have more people seating and watching those games on broad, and we can watch and see that on broadcast and go, wow, this is really catching on. Carsten, I understand when we joined the show, I understand people have questions for me,
Yes.
which I was kind of like, okay, this is a nice twist. I'm so used to getting asked. So let's flip the chairs. I'm going to sit here now. I think I understand it's, I believe, two, but if there's more, I'm welcome to answer them. So without further ado, we'll let you host the Gridiron Gallery show for just a little bit.
Okay, there's this Facebook group over here, the European League of Football Info Group. I think it has like 15 or 18,000 people that are in it. And there's a lot of stuff surrounding the ELF in it, from pictures to stories, and a lot of newbies ask questions. And one of the questions was, how do the Americans view this league, the ELF? Do they watch it? Do they even know it exists besides you? I mean,
Right. I'm going to say that I think for those that are hardcore football, that they just love the sport in general, that they research what is all out there, they're liking it. It's because of the fact that it's another avenue that you can watch your favorite sport, and that it fills in that kind of need for those people in the summertime. Obviously that's going to change next year when, say, the CFL, the Canadian Football League, that is, will be starting up, and they'll play a full summer schedule starting in May. It'll be a little different than their August start, but nonetheless, it's another avenue you can watch, and it gets you interested in stuff that you might have not known overseas was possible. Now, for maybe more casual fans, it's a little different. I think you're going to see right now, it's mostly the hardcore football fans that know about this right now. For us, it's been a really pleasant surprise, like we've been discussing here in the show. It's definitely turned my head and made myself at least blown away by the broadcast quality, like I'm reiterating, by the talent and play that's been out there. Some of these highlights have been fantastic for these games. I mean, there's been hiccups, and there's been games that have been, I'm like, okay, it's a blowout, but most of them I've been like, they're competitive for a majority of their contests, and the broadcasts help make this nicer. So I think you're seeing in America a lot of hardcore football fans, because there's a disparity. There's those that really like football and like any league that they can get their hands on. And then there's those that are casual fans that they're like, well, I like the NFL or college football here because it's cool, over here, because it's the thing that everyone else likes, So the hardcore ones, I think, are more the people that are really embracing the European League of Football. And I think we're overall, from people I talk to and those that are our hardcore community over here, we like it. It's a good league so far. It's lived up to what we hoped it would, at least for the most part, the best case scenario it has lived up to. So I would say it's getting a thumbs up from people that, check out stuff beyond what is the NFL or college teams.
and did you know about the players, the import players like Marjorie London or Jacob Sullivan? Are those players that ring a bell in America? Say, oh, I'm going to watch him.
Yeah, I've seen a few. So since like Madre London, you bring up, interesting story. Before he came over here, he was playing in a league over here that's kind of semi arena football, which, for those that maybe don't know what arena football is, it's basically you're playing football on a 50-yard field in a basketball stadium, is essentially what it is. So he was playing a kind of a pseudo version of that called the Fan Controlled Football League. And for those that watch over here, we saw him play there. And obviously he was really popular in college, playing at Michigan State. So he was definitely getting eyeballs. People really thought that he was going to be a higher prospect in the NFL that could go somewhere. And I had known about him in the FCF, but I had not expected him to completely start just ripping apart teams in the way and fashion that he has. But I've definitely known of his existence, and I've been trying to keep track of imports. Obviously, Aaron Ellis, I am very aware of. A, he's been on the show, but B, we played in high school together on the same team. I was actually his starting center, so I've known him for a while now. I just been following his journey since he graduated from college, is the other thing. Centavious Jones, who plays for the Berlin Thunder, that's an XFL connection, so definitely was going to be keeping an eye there. Knew about him for sure. And then I got anyone else that I've been keeping an eye on. I got to thank a buddy here. His name's Vincent. He runs Alternative Football Scouting Report on Twitter. He's the guy that basically he makes highlight Twitter threads and reels like any given weekend for the club leagues. So he also put together this really nice spreadsheet and has helped me keep up with even more imports. But I guess for the main three that I mentioned there, those are the guys I really was keeping up with just from either I knew them personally or I've watched them in leagues here that I've been like, I'm excited to see what he can do over here in this new league. So I do keep track of imports when I am able to find them, and especially ones that I have heard names over the last few years once I've started talking more of these alternative leagues.
And it's not too many imports, so you can keep track of them. So there's this limitation that helps a lot. It's different than in the GFL. They are more allowed in the GFL, but it's a lot more restricted in the ELF, which makes it easier, I think, too. Yeah. Okay, the second question is not for the ELF, but for the NFL. For a couple of years, the NFL staged the international games in London, mostly from 2007 on in Wembley Stadium and Twickenham for, I think, 2 or 3 years, and now in Tottenham. What's your opinion as an American football fan? Because I know there's a lot of season ticket holders that are not fans of this practice, but on the other hand, the NFL wants to grow the game. Of course, they want to earn money here. So what's your opinion about it?
Well, that's a good point with the season ticket holders. It's something that isn't always brought up. The flip side of the coin, especially when you're talking the Jacksonville Jaguars, Shad Khan obviously has a connection overseas. So he's been really the main, I would say, kind of the spearhead of keeping them as an international mainstay and kind of making them one of the more de facto popular teams over across the pond. At least I hope that's the case. It seems, I mean, you consistently have a team going over there. That's what I notice. But I like the growth. And again, this is more stemming from recent years, starting to look at other club leagues and outside of just the US for alternative leagues. I think that you're seeing between the NFL, the Canadian Football League, and maybe even what the XFL is rumoring with this new iteration, there's going to be a kind of an arms race for the international markets and international eyeballs. Because at least the NFL, you're seeing they want to go to Canada now again. They want to go to Germany. They're already talking with several stadiums in cities in Germany that they want to host a game there in the near future. Obviously, they have the UK that they've been locking down there as well and been playing for several years too. Mexico, they're trying to explore a bit more as well. And there's just many opportunities. They're trying to get at least showcase games. That's their whole spiel. The Canadian Football League, they want to have partnerships with clubs across the world. That's their whole play. So they want to be a unifier, and they want to be the first to talking with players and getting potential player combines and spreading their game internationally too. And then the XFL, they want to look international. That's all we know. But for the NFL's sake, overall, I think I like it. For the ticket holders, that's a thing that is hard. They did expand the schedule this year, and I'm worried that they might in later years do that if, say, international showcases keep expanding. Obviously NFL owners, if you talk to anyone in the United States, and if you look at sports leagues US, not to say that none of these leagues look to turn a profit and maximize profit, but the NFL is probably the most we have to maximize profit, find every avenue for getting money type of league that you can imagine. So expanding the roster, going international, and getting more viewers, which means more eyeballs, which means more advertising dollars and TV dollars. Yeah, this is definitely something they're going to do. I like it because I get to talk with more people like yourself that are intrigued with this game. The game grows. It's not just, it becomes less of it's an American sport. Now it becomes something that's like internationally, it gets better recognized even more and more with the growth with the NFL, because the Shield itself kind of represents football, unless, like we talked earlier, unless you're inside the US. Outside, it just seems like in my own eyes, it could be different to you, but to me, the NFL kind of anywhere outside the US that's not maybe Canada or like Mexico, it's like, okay, yeah, this is definitely football. That, like, this is the football entity of the world, at least. So I think that growth, it helps the game overall too, because they'll push it harder, and they have the money to advertise and make it grow very much so, and at least get a niche or at least a chunk of that viewership that maybe is different, at least in the sports hierarchy outside of the US and North America.
And I think week 17 is perfect for it, because it makes it a little less, it makes it more balanced. If everyone has 8 home games and 1 neutral site game in Europe or wherever. So
right.
I think that's one of the main advantages from my point of view for the week 17. It's not like I waited for it, but this would be really good for Germany. And they published like a offer for the German stadiums. They should prepare to get proposals out who wants to host a game. But I think there's only a handful of stadiums that would be able to have it. And Berlin would be, I think, on number 1, the Frankfurt one in Hamburg, 1 in Munich. And I think that's more or less about it. And maybe next year, or at least in 23, I think we will see an NFL game in Germany, which will be sold out in about 10 minutes, I think, at least. At the highest, because the London games had, every time I'm over there, and I think I got like 12 trips to Wembley and Tottenham, and there's so many German fans, and in the last couple of years it got even more. I think it's like maybe a fourth of all the spectators there. So I think at least 20,000 should be from Germany. So I think wherever it is in Germany, it will be sold out in minutes, and the black market will explode.
I think. I think you're gonna, whenever the NFL finalizes a game, a neutral site in Germany, whatever city they pick, arguably probably Berlin, maybe Frankfurt, kind of go for one of those two. Hamburg. I mean, you could go that route. You're gonna get an audience, is the thing. So they're looking forward to that. And I'm glad, like I said, I'm glad you brought up that extra game. And this is something I'll be honest, I kind of didn't think about it when they added the week. I was so concerned about in my neck of the woods going, oh man, a longer season for these players. That was my whole thing. But like the neutral site and being able to say, well, now internationally, or at least every team now has an extra game. So in theory, we could do it that way. And then if you're expanding international, you can almost have at that point, possibly all 32 teams play some neutral site outside of the US in that mindset, because you have that extra week where they all can have that oddball off even game that they can eventually schedule. And so it totally makes sense how they're now starting to talk as soon as the 17 game schedule is made. Hey, let's look at Toronto. Let's look at like Saskatchewan in Canada. Let's look at Berlin, Frankfurt out in Germany, of course. Let's look at anywhere outside the UK. Places that want us will go. So kind of a fascinating point to bring up. I appreciate that. Like I said, wasn't thinking that completely, but now it's almost like an epiphany type of moment for myself. Like, it makes sense.
Yes. But Toronto didn't work out the last time the Buffalo Bills went there.
That's
for,
true.
I think, was it 3 years or 4 years in a row? But I think they got out of the contract early.
Mm-hmm.
But,
the Rogers Center was they wanted to get back over and move on. But that's an issue for a later time. I think as long as it's a showcase and maybe they don't use Buffalo, maybe they choose different teams there that could work.
A good team.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, good team and one that doesn't step on.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. More now it's one that doesn't step on the toes of the local Buffalo fans that don't want to travel across the Canadian border, Don't steal a home game from me, although they can't really now. Like I said, the oddball schedule. So.
And it's really close because I wanted to go to the NFL draft this year, but COVID helped getting away from that too. And I tried to drive then from Buffalo to Toronto. So it's really close and it is like a home game, but they didn't want to.
Man. All right. Carsten, any other questions that maybe they didn't ask for community-wise, but I can maybe answer that has been coming up?
I think I'm good right now. I think they will like your answer for the first one.
All right. Awesome. I'm glad anything that they have bring up, please come to me with it, or, I can pass it along to some people too. Cause as interest grows, I'm fine with hearing people out there, if they want to talk the game across the pond, well, in our sense, across the pond back to the US would be different. So, I'm welcome to add any insight that I can. And for myself now, Carsten, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on today. Really pleasure getting to meet you. Pleasure to talk with you, just the league in general. It's so far, at least ELF focusing wise, a lot of positives, but as you and I have said, things that they will have to address year two, of course, and that we'll see go on. And maybe not the announcers. I get there's a difference in broadcast. So, if that's not brought up, oh well, it's a European league. It's not an American league. So I can't force that one on anyone over there. You know what I mean? But thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it today.
Thanks for the invite. The German listeners, or the ones that watch the NFL on the German television, they are used to also. Usually there's two, sometimes even three guys who do the games. So maybe it will expand there too. Okay, but thanks a lot, and it's been really fun.
The Gridiron Gallery Podcast. New episodes every Friday on your favorite podcast platforms, YouTube, and premiering first, as always, at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, only on unhingedsn.com.